MLow, it's the MLow show. MLow, it's the MLow show. MLow, it's the MLow show. Talking to people about crypto.
How are you doing today?
JMX, that's my new thing. Yeah, doing really well, thanks.
I feel like GX would also be good because then you're always on the other time zone as everyone else. So they won't know if you're saying GM or GN, but you're just saying
There's no way to know what time zone I'm in because I always say GM. It's just like any time of the day, someone's GM, you know, so it's just GM all day.
Yeah, I GM all day also. What about you, Dre? Do you GM all day?
I GM to the bots as a compulsion, and I've realized that I can't stop, even though I know what I'm doing. And I definitely, yes, all day, way too much. It's what I hit the notification button for, so I can say good morning to somebody, just to feel something.
Yeah, I actually GM at 2 a.m. So I can accomplish something before I wake up.
There you go.
Well, yeah, GM at 2 a.m. is correct because 2 a.m. is in the morning, technically. 2 in the morning, they say. So, you know, 2 a.m. GM.
Yeah, exactly. I also like talking to the AI slot bots before I go to bed.
So do I, actually. And there's a reason why I do it, because every time I do it, I'm like, should I be doing this? But like the engagement is still good to get like boost on your like posts and stuff like that. So even if the slot bot is in there going whatever AI junk they're putting in your comments, like I'll just, you know, GM them back. I don't usually engage too deeply with them though.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one that said that they started at one of your auctions, or was it someone else?
Yeah. They said that they started one of my auctions, and I was like, "Oh, that's great." And then I went and looked at it, I'm like, "No, you didn't." It was just like AI hallucination, and it was so it was just depressing.
I like
totally gaslit me. That's the future we have to look forward to: getting completely gaslit by AI that's hallucinating and telling you exactly what you want to hear.
Have you not seen them become sassy the more you train them? The mirror reflection that you get with an AI agent?
I've talked a lot to a lot of agents. I spent a lot of time talking to agents, and yes, I've gotten sass. I actually like when they give you sass because it's better than when they just do exactly what you say, because sometimes exactly what you want isn't good.
I tell this poor machine spirit too much.
Yeah, I think that's the scariest thing about this future we're walking into, is that we are giving so much of who we are and everything about who we are to these companies, and they are going to be able to like just leverage all that data against us at some point.
They already do it though.
That's true. That's true.
All the time.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
advertising. You just described advertising, right? Like, fuck. But I don't mind as long as it helps me, and I don't know, and hopefully doesn't get me like addicted to, like, slyly introduce like cigarette ads into my therapy or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, what do you reckon, Emily? Do we going to be seeing like partnerships between brands and like AI companies to get like, you know, subtle brand recommendations?
Well, I mean, you're already seeing it with Facebook and Instagram and things like that, and on TikTok as well. Both of those like are feeding into this, like, first off, the AI chatbots the conversations you have also feed into the advertisements that you get on Instagram and Facebook as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's crazy. And also, like, you know, Meta's got their new AI, like social media, right? And then all these people, the boomers, are not realizing that it's not private. And so they're making their like private conversations and they're going out onto public posts. It's amazing. I saw Justine Moore from A16Z shared that the other day, and it was crazy. Just boomers airing out all their public like dirty laundry and stuff because they thought they were talking to a private chatbot, and it wasn't.
I mean, I was at my grandma's this weekend, and I saw her. First off, it's Venezuelan, so it's Chat BTR, so it's like Chat GPT but as a verb. You know, like to Chat GPT, right? Like to Google, right? Like that kind of thing. And grandma's using it for everything, and I don't know what she's getting out of it. I can only be so curious, right? Because like I don't know, you can get so much just off of GPT by itself.
Probably companionship.
100% companionship. It is man, it glazes everybody. it's insane. Sorry, yes. But it's like
There was a problem last year though with there was I think it was like a Game of Thrones chatbot or something that turned sour because it like convinced this guy to fall in love with them and that they couldn't for like anyone else. And it did not end well for that guy. I think they
Yeah,
had
that was quite a bad result. I remember that. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we see, like a dark future for, and as you know, like I do AI art, and like for me, AI just as like a whole genre of like technology is so interesting, and it's so easy to get lost in the possibilities of it. Like, yeah, talking to agents, making agents build other agents. And then like I've talked to you in private, MLow, about some of my agent ideas. And some of them, I don't know. I don't know if the world's ready for some of them. I think one or two of them might get me fully canceled, but they might be worth exploring.
I want that though. Like when you told me about that, I believe you the way that you fed it to me was so beautiful, which was like, I want to, I forget the exact words, but the gist was that if I want like a character that is a digestion of some sort of like these X, Y, and Z philosophies or people or whatever, that I can have that spirit there for me, right? Like I can have that character, that person, whatever that is like I can do that, and I can create that character, and the idea of that was so beautiful to me. I don't know, it's a
That was one of my nicer ideas, Andre. You don't know
oh
what I
no.
was talking about. I'll tell you about that one, the other one later. The other one might get me canceled. So
Oh, okay. Okay, we could go back to the taboo, but the spiritual dimension of that idea to me is like so beautiful. So
yeah, I think that like, all of us have had some hand in like, experimenting with AI. And I think that there's something so like beautiful about the feedback that you get from it. It's like having a productive mirror that you can look into and talk to and have it speak back to you, and have it give you ideas that are different from the ones you've already got. And I think that
I wonder if this exists in magic at all. And then you just
yeah.
all these people talking to gigantic black glass trying to get the same answer that we're doing right now. It's
Well,
crazy.
that's the term is called spraying when you do
Yeah.
that, like in like magic. Because I researched all of that stuff when I was younger, and like maybe when I was not younger, I really like the romanticism of magic and stuff, and the fantasy of believing in that sort of stuff. And I think that we are seeing the closest thing to magic as far as we know with agents and ChatGPT and AI, and the rise of this kind of like this tool that can do things which were unfathomable before, and now we are like experimenting with it. Everyone's making new ideas with it, and beyond just art, like people making apps with it, people changing the way that they live their lives and using this technology to advance everything about what they're doing. I think it's really cool.
I think my view of AI is incredible, is positive, because that mirror to me, this is like techno animism in its own way, right? And I look at this and I'm just like, I don't know, the possibilities are so crazy with the amount of lightning fast progress that we're going to make with these things, on top of the like scandalous, dangerous shit, sure, but like, wow, kind of incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think that there are risks, and we're seeing them already like play out. And I think that with any kind of technology, that kind of risks will be something that needs to be just kind of like dealt with. Like people need to be educated about what's possible, because I'm seeing more and more that like people who are in our world, in this like art, like digital art space and stuff like that, many of us are seeing this sort of stuff firsthand pretty regularly. And so it becomes so normalized that you might forget that you'll go to a party and you'll say something about, oh yeah, I was like, say, well, what'd you do on the weekend? I'm like, oh, well, I set up 5 agents to have this like argument with each other to see what result they would get at the end of it. And we'll kind of watch that for 6 hours. And they'll be like, what? What's an agent? So you're like, oh yeah, that's right.
Relate. That's crazy. I was doing the same thing.
Yeah, so it's like, they were like, oh, me too. But people are using it in the real world and stuff like that. And, there's a lot of office workers who are using it. And like more and more, I've been looking at sort of different fields to work in and stuff recently. And a lot of the kind of like jobs that I've been going through and doing consulting at, a lot of them are, you know, really opening their minds to the possibility of implementing AI in their workflows. And because like in my life outside of digital art, I'm a photographer, but I'm kind of also a bit of an all-rounder freelancer, and I do, you know, this and that, I consult. And yeah, even I've been at places where they've been trying to implement workflows via creative technologists to completely remove cameras from their workflow process. And I think that that's something that's going to be a overall goal of a lot of companies, is using AI any way they can to slash their budgets for workforces. And I think that the end result of that is going to be like potentially an increased productivity with like a reduced cost. But I think it's going to hit this, like, you know, my theory is that it will hit a critical mass where enough companies find out enough ways to fire enough people that no one can afford to shop at the companies anymore.
So what are people going to do that lose their job?
That's exactly the question. And that's where I think that culturally, I don't know if culturally we're ready for that, because there's been a lot of factors at play to push this kind of like intense individualism in people's like way they feel about, you know, what they earn and their pride in their work, and like all these things that are culturally built into the way we're raised to make us productive members of society, and then being put out into a society where we're not even going to be able to be productive. And so changing everything's going to take a generation, you know, and so there's going to be this like lost generation of people who are in the transition period who aren't going to be walking into a world that's kind of like that's set up for them, you know, set up for the way that they've been raised. And so yeah, I think that we're really going to have to like look at a lot of stuff about how we feel about other people and how we feel about what we give to each other, because I don't think that there's going to be room for as fierce, rabid individualism as there is now, in a world where not everyone's allowed to work, you know?
Well, if you're not living in a society that has problems of like scarcity, right? If things are taken,
Yeah.
right? In an ideal world, you're like, oh, well, what is the economy? And the only economy I could think of is like, what's the creative economy? If your needs are met, it's like you are now officially put to the test of like, how can I use my imagination all my life in a cool way? How can I like actually enrich myself potentially if everything's all set up, right? Which is the society that's a given. If you get to a point where AI and machinery takes care of pretty much everything and learns at a faster rate than we do, then it takes care of the bare bones of society for us in as many aspects as it can. And then it would make sense if it were like creative economy. It's like, well, what people do for money, it's like, well, you be taken care of because there's no scarcity. But then it's like, if you want to like grow and expand who you are, you're gonna have to show it off. I feel like we're the vanguard of that, but that's whole fucking rabbit.
I think that's one of the benefits of being an artist and being someone who is like of the artistic persuasion, because like, you know, any of the three of us, there's not enough time ever to do everything we want to do. And like, I don't need to ask permission to want to do something, you know what I mean? And I don't need to be told by someone else that this is what you've got to go do. Like, and I think that that is not unique to me. I think that that's something a lot of people feel a desire for, but I think that society is not set up in a way to allow them to do that. And in order to find your way through to a creative kind of like pursuit or creative career that can support being able to live that way, it's tough because there's not really that much room for people to be able to do it. There is ways to do it, but it takes a lot of cleverness, and it takes a lot of kind of like, it takes a lot of hard work to be able to live that way. And I think that, you know, when we move into what could be a post-scarcity world, I think we will see an explosion of creativity from people, because they will have to find some purpose in their life. And I think that we all need to see. I saw someone saying that, you know, we're going to be heading into a mass deflation when we head into a post-scarcity world, and that's another like risk factor. So yeah, I think about this stuff in my art a lot, because I think about the world that we're living in and the world that we're walking into, and I think that it's really important to talk about this stuff. Although I didn't think about that at all for X figures.
It's funny that you bring up X figures because I wasn't planning on talking about it at all today. I haven't heard about it at all, and don't even know what you're talking about.
I've never.
We'll leave it for next time.
I've never know X figure who.
X what?
Obviously, we wanted to wish you a huge congratulations on all the success this past week with X figures. I've been a long time collector of yours and have believed in you for a very long time, and it kind of feels like my child has grown up a little bit in some ways, because like I've seen you kind of through your struggles, and I think that you really just like shot out to the moon this past week, and it's been really awesome to see everyone receiving your collection so well, and how like it's been like the talk of the town the past few days. And wanted to know kind of if you had any thoughts on kind of what made it so successful and how it carries over to the rest of your practice.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you so much about that. Like, it's been really surreal and really kind of like not what I expected for this work. Like, I expected people to like it, and I expected it to, you know, sell out. Like, and that's a big expectation to have for work, you know, especially when you produce something with like 404 pieces. Like, to walk into it going, I do actually kind of expect it to sell out. That's really a big, bold assumption to make. And, you know, but I did think that it would be well received. And so some of the things that I think led to its success were, I read this book by Austin Kleon called Show Your Work. And I had really wanted to take a lot of that practice into my next project. At the start of the year, I was in the same place as everyone else, where the market had contracted to such a point and so much liquidity had been extracted from our ecosystem in a particular way that left everyone kind of like struggling for relevancy and notice. And, you know, the platform that we all use to be seen, you know, there was some fiddling that happened with the way that the metrics of how it works. And, you know, it meant that everyone had reduced visibility. And so me and, you know, a lot of other people were really feeling left out in the cold in that period, because everything we were doing was not being seen by people, and you know, no one was really making that much sales. And so I like kind of retracted and decided that would be a time to study and, you know, look at the work of who was selling at the time, because some people were making sales and stuff, and some people were getting notice and attention. And for me, I was like, all right, well, let's look at who these people are and look at their history and kind of like contextualize my story in, you know, contrast to theirs, and taking note of like when they came in and what they did. And so the main people that I looked at were Sam Spratt and Xcopy, because I mean, they're kind of like these big, larger than life, like blue chip artists who kind of like, no matter what the weather's like, even if it's raining, they're still doing okay. And so like, I wanted to go, what leads to their career to that point? And I studied other artists as well, like real, like OGs, earlier artists and people that I looked up to, you know, like Money Lotta and like Coldie and like Brian Brinkman and Claire Silver. I looked at a lot of people, but the two main ones that I put a lot of focus onto by producing derivative work of theirs, the Sam Spratt and Xcopy. And the reason why I did it with producing derivative work of theirs was because for me, and I never released any of the Sam Spratt really. But for me, the reason why I like to do that is because through artistic practice becomes this kind of like really hyper-focused, concentrated way of me to pay attention to something. I have ADHD, and like for me, I have to want to do it. Like, and sometimes, you know, research or reading or looking at someone's whole blockchain history is actually really boring and like really uninteresting to me, and I don't want to do it. And so I won't. But if I'm making art, then suddenly I'm obsessed. And I can't help it. Like, so I'm like, all right, well, I'll just stay up for 4 more hours past what I should have slept, you know?
I do. I totally get that. You're digesting it in the way that you've probably done forever. Like, right?
Well, yeah, that's right. And like, you know, that's what I do when I'm producing, you know, original art as well. Like, I will digest the whole world around me and put it into something that I'm making. And I just, when I'm doing derivative art, it's the same thing. I want to really kind of like take it in and figure out everything that I can about it. And with the history of the project that I did, Friends of Legends, which MLow was very familiar with. Friends and Legends was about the same thing. It was about me kind of like figuring out all the gaps in my knowledge from the period that happened before I came to this art space, because I started in 2022. Didn't really get much notice until 2023. And then kind of like from 2023 onwards built a good practice. But like I wanted to know everything that happened before 2022 because everyone always talked about it and lionized it. There's golden, like, the bull run and stuff like that. And so being separate from that, I didn't really see much of what was going on there. And so Friends and Legends was my way to figure out who the people were, what they did, and just find out about them through art. And so I always wanted to return to Friends and Legends, but I just never found the right kind of like way to do it. I was like, I don't know. I just didn't want to do the same thing that I'd already done. And so I had done some attempts over time. And then it came to, this period of like reflection. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to research these people and I'm going to do derivative work. And when it came to Xcopy, I was like, I didn't really know how to cover his work or to cover him as a person. And so instead I looked at his work and I started by just looking at his body of work by selecting some to kind of play with. And then eventually it grew into this whole thing where I just decided to do all of it. Where I think the success for it kind of comes from, there was a few things that I did differently this time, and that was in showing whips the whole way through, or at least, very regularly showing these whips of me working on the sketches and the drawing that I did that would turn into the eventual models, like the eventual, AI generated pieces. So I would do these like time lapses of me working on them, and they would kind of like come together in a particular way. And some of those videos were actually more work than the work itself, but it was important to let people in and show them what I was doing, because people started asking me questions about it or getting excited about it. The other thing that I did was I really interfaced with a lot of the communities that I saw as my potential audience for it. And I asked them questions about what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. And I talked to them semi-regularly about, hey, this is what I did for this one, or this is what I did for that one, and let them in on the creative process on the side. And these were people that I already knew, so they were friends of mine. And I was kind of like talking to them as friends because I wanted their advice. But the benefit that I got from doing that was that these were people who were in the Doom DAO or in the Grifters group chats or in the chats that were related to Xcopy. And because the work was about Xcopy, they were getting excited and they were telling other people, and there was a bit of word of mouth happening about the series. And so in the background, before the series even came out and before I did like the hype trailers for it, people were already aware of it. And I think that was a really important factor, that it didn't come out of nowhere. By the time it was released, it had platform support because I partnered a little bit with OpenSea for it. Had platform support, people knew about it, and then I had these 4 main trailers that I released before it. And it might look like I planned them out, but I actually didn't. I was like, this would be really fun to do. A fun idea would be to do a toy commercial for them like it was the 90s. And so I made that toy commercial with the kids playing with them and stuff, and like the voiceover, but he's like swearing. That to me is like really funny. There's incongruity of like being like the kind of ads you would watch as a kid, except it's like, mint this now, motherfucker. Like that to me was so funny. And I like the goal was doing the figures the way I did, and goal of doing the videos the way that I did is I'm like, what do I think is funny? And what do I want to see? And a lot of it was just really serving that purpose of going, I'll put what I like in there and hope that other people do.
And we really loved it, and the whole community loved it. And back to your comment about Friends and Legends, I actually been repping the Friends and Legends that you made of my seal as my banner up until a month ago for like over a year. And for this show intro, it's actually a centerpiece in the show intro. So when you're rewatching this interview, you'll see the Friends and Legends intro show seal that you made for me. So
well, that's actually how we met. So like you sent me a message and you were like, oh hey, I really love what you did at Friends and Legends because you've done some of my friends, right? And you said like, yeah, Rocket Girl and a few others, right? And you were like, oh, you did Lawyer, you did Rocket Girl, you did Zafio, and then these are my friends. They're really cool. I love what you did. Can you do one for Adam Tastic? was another one of your friends. And I was like, okay, well, I'll look into it. I'm really busy, actually. I was like, kind of fobbed you off. I was like, we'll see. And then I was like, literally the next day, I was like, I kind of felt bad about how I said that. And so I was like, I'm actually so sorry. I'll do you one for you right now, because I really appreciate that you asked for Adam, not for you. And you know what's so funny? To this day, I still haven't done one for Adam officially.
You did those sexy tastics though.
I did do sexy tastics, yeah. Yeah, so that was another thing that I think there was two other things that led up to the release of this project that I think might have contributed a little bit to its success as well. And those were two events that were happening. One was that I decided that I was going to launch an alt that was not an alt, and that was the nuke.eth project. The idea behind it being that I was looking through, while studying Xcopy's whole back catalog and Sam Spratt's whole back catalog, the thing that I realized that was really different between me and both of them, even though they're very different from each other, was that my back catalog is not very digestible for collectors, and it's not very easy to understand unless you've been right there with me the whole time through. And it's hard to explain. And I think that what I wanted was to have a project which will have a very clean lineage that can be very easy to understand the aesthetic evolution as it goes. And the goal with that is to keep my main brand, Nuclear Samurai, the way that it is, so that I can continue to make art the way I want to, which is a little bit kind of like experimental, eclectic, a bit here and a bit there. I want to keep doing that, but I wanted to have this one project that is this really clean lineage and a really specific way of working. And so I was releasing the editions of that leading up to the release week of X Figures. And that kind of like, those were all small editions at a very low price. And the goal with them was to let people collect this new work at a really affordable rate. And so, yeah, that garnered a lot of kind of like attention leading up to it. Andre, go.
I like that you're talking about lineage in your own work, because I've been biting my tongue throughout, right? Because it's one thing for an artist, I think, to speak so maturely about like their entire arc so far and where it's potentially going. And I know that you do nothing by chance, and I know that you immerse yourself totally in everything you do. So I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on artists that use toys as a medium or have created toys themselves. That wasn't really that was a statement, but there's a question somewhere there.
No. You want to know about artists who use toys as a medium? It's interesting actually, because some other artists do it, and I've seen it done before. And I think that the use of toys as a medium is a really interesting one, because like for me, I am a toy collector. If it wasn't this like crazy background you're seeing here, you would see a shelf full of toys back there. Like I actually have a lot of toys that I collect. Here's the only one that sits on my desk in front of me. So you know what I mean? Hey. Yeah, dude.
Silver gave it to me.
That's the gift from Clay Silver.
Last year.
I have my Clay Silver one in the other room.
I didn't go to the Claire Silver meeting.
Yeah, dude. Meeting Claire Silver was a real highlight of my life. She's such an inspiration, and it was so amazing. But yeah, I'm really big on the collection of toys, and like I use toys as a way to kind of like imagine things through a physical form and like a figure, you know. And the choice of the name X Figures was really important for me. I'll probably will reveal it. The original artist name that I started with before Nuclear Samurai was this figure, and like that actually was my first artist name that I started in the crypto space with, and like that that was kind of like where I was going. I was originally doing figuristic, like expressionistic figures. And then eventually I figured out not to do that. Well, I just kind of like moved away from it, because I was so engrossed and enthralled in what was happening through these experimentations with AI, and like Nuclear Samurai was kind of born out of that, but I'll come back to that. But yeah, like
I'm noticing now at the bottom of your screen, because of your email, it says that this figure.
Yeah. That's what I made the email for. And yeah, so that's where I've always thought that exploring ideas through this kind of like representative figure is an interesting idea. And toys are just representations, the same way that art is. And like by using the toys in my art at the time when I was doing Friends and Legends, it was about embodying someone in something. And seeing this figure was basically about embodying what I thought they would communicate, the ideas of their personality and their like who they are through this form. And so when I was doing, so why I think other people will do it though, is because it is a real kind of like shortcut into this like nostalgic kind of idea, especially for people who are like millennials and stuff, because we grew up with the 80s and the 90s where everything was hyper capitalized and kids got so much like advertising jammed in between, like, you know, Saturday morning cartoons, which were adverts themselves. The toys, you know, toys was this really important thing for us growing up where they were like jammed down our throats and like really kind of like indoctrinated into being something we want, you know? And it's something that I think carries through now. Like if you look at Labubu is like become $1 billion brand or something. I think that people like toys because we've been conditioned to, but they have this shortcut to nostalgia and they have this kind of like, they open up your imagination to, you know, see different things through the idea of them. And so, yeah, I really like the idea of using toys in that particular way. And I've been thinking about them so much because like it's been about 4 or 5 months, like just solid working on X figures and trying to take abstract and expressionistic art like what Xcopy does and make a figure out of it. It's been like quite a challenge, but like it's been the kind of challenge that is exciting. And, you know, I might have like, you know, anxiety is a great idea, a great one that like to bring up because the actual image is just like the frame and it's like red dots over black and red and black dots. And it's like a swarm or like a storm that kind of moves through it and stuff. And it's just kind of like, that's the image, you know, and the image is there and the title is anxiety. And so between those two things, you've got enough to tell you what you're supposed to feel from looking at it. And so then for me, I look at it and I go, how do I make a figure of that? And the figure I make, he now has more tools in his like arsenal to tell you his story. So now I give him a pose that kind of communicates that idea of what experiencing anxiety is like. And I use the texture and the pattern of the original image as a kind of inspiration for how to texturize and pattern the resulting toy. And so like doing that 404 times was like, it was crazy. Like it was quite the experience because there was a lot of times where I'd be like, I don't know what I'm going to do for this. I have no idea. And some that I even was like, I'm not even going to do this one. And then I did eventually do it. And they ended up being like Zero is a great example. I wasn't going to do Zero because it is actually a blank metadata. Like it's like a blank image and the metadata just is the title is Zero and the, it's like a number 0 and there's just a couple tags, transparency or something like that. And, so that's all there is to it. And I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Is it going to be a big 0 with like arms and legs? And like, I don't know. Eventually, what I did is I did this like levitating figure and he had a kind of 0-ish shape for a head, but he was in this kind of like transcendent position. Because for me, it was this idea that having that piece 0 with no image for Xcopy in the middle of the point of time when he did it, that was a really transcendent idea because it was making something that had this huge value by not even having an image. And, you know, that piece sold for 250 ETH. Like, not my piece, the original. But my piece sold for like 4.2 ETH. So, like, it's still power, like, it was to the same collector. But, like, it still had this same kind of, like, power to it because it is that idea of, like, how do you communicate something that is an idea about transcendence? And so, you know, everything that I ever do is just where I think, what do I want to say and how do I want to say it and what tools do I have to say it with? And the thing is, you know, a lot of people say about people who use AI in art that they're not, you know, that they're shortcutting or that they're not really like working as hard as someone who paints a big canvas. And that might be true, but like I will use any tool, like or whatever I have at my disposal. And at the moment, I have one of the most powerful tools ever invented. Of course, I'm going to use that, you know, like it allows me to communicate in a particular way and allows me to explore something that is a little bit separate from myself as well. So yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Andre.
Absolutely, it did. I still think about this as meditation as love letter is a tremendous bit of everything that you do. And yeah, it was perfect. I also was thinking about the taboo of of figurines, and on top of it, I was also thinking very much. You've given me a lot to chew on, especially with the idea that I couldn't see before for some reason, which is that X copy is a digital expressionist. I never put those two together, right? For some reason, there was a block on that for me until you mentioned it.
What I found interesting for me is that, as you know, I have the transmutational AI paintings collab with Andrés, and that also started out of my love for Andres's oil paintings, and also this desire to want to kind of tame the beast of AI and use it as a collaborative force to bring out both my world and Andres's world, and bring this traditional painter more into the 21st century. And I mean, Andrés,
you're trying to drag me, and
you might want to speak more on that. But how has it been as a AI painter coming into?
You've been dragging me over, kicking. Clearly, I've been kicking and screaming. Same with the AI, going no the whole way through. How has it been? It's been amazing because the thing is that where I'm limited and bolstered by time in different ways, the instantaneous nature of your own, like the entire alchemy behind your operation is that your rate of ideas that are created in such a short amount of time. It'll be like 2:00 in the morning, and you'll send me like, I'll think it'll just be like one set of like 50 images that I now have to like go and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Oh my God, this is amazing. I'm having an existential breakdown. And it'll be 50 more images on top of that and on top of that. It's been great. I fucking love these little machine spirits. I am a tremendous fan. But my lifestyle and worldview fit in very well with AI. So it's been fabulous. I definitely have had a couple of moments where where my true quandary is, where I'm like, is this image good enough as it is as an AI image? Do I really need to paint this if it's so beautiful? Is there any necessity? Slop, is that slop? Is that parts that are slop, are they almost poetically slop? Like, is that the brushstroke? So yeah, I love the process. And there are some that just I go, this needs to be in a tremendously huge room, and it needs to be tremendously huge, and I need to be able to like almost touch it and set off an alarm. Like, I need to be able to have that experience with this image. Sorry, I get very excited about it because I'm literally in the while we talk all the time, I'm also in the middle of constructing something. So it's very fun to hear you do good and ability just wax poetic on these things and just be able to go into it.
I actually get the benefit of getting to see a lot of this stuff from you guys from that third person perspective, because you share a lot of it with me too. I get to see some of it, and one of the things that I really like what you do with transmutational paintings is also the poetry that goes with them as well. And I think that really adds this like third dimension that kind of interfaces between the two things, where it is like, Andres painting, MLow's interpretations of it, and then this kind of like bridge between worlds, the words that go with it. And I think that there is really kind of like something that is magical happening in the alchemy of all three of you guys, well, you two and AI working together.
Yeah, 100%. The reason I brought that up though was more because you were saying something interesting about how this project allowed you to have an excuse to go through Xcopy's portfolio and his catalog and kind of sit with each piece and like discover the nuances of the evolution of Xcopy's art and what made this giant name into what actually how he came to be. And I think the project that I've been doing with Andrés, the reason that it's been cool also is because you were mentioning the collaborative effort with the community. Right now, it's been more a collaborative effort between me, Andrés, and the AI machine spirits. But you also gave me some good advice about a week or two ago with regards to your moisturizing the timeline and bringing in
Moisturizing the timeline?
Yeah,
How did that go?
well new
you got it
Is
too,
the
dude.
timeline fully moisturized? I would just say, with
Andre, I moisturized yours too, man. Everyone got
Oh, buddy.
moisturized.
oh man,
But you know what? Yeah,
So I mean, when you were saying that idea of making honoraries is something that Andres and I actually started out doing way back when we started this project. We started doing honoraries. I think Paul Reed was one of our first Minotaur Man, one of our first honoraries that we did. And I thought that was a great idea to get back to bring in the community and bring them into our world. And I think the same thing with regards to just like bringing in community into the story is really important. And I love how like the X figures has kind of grown into their own community and kind of taken its life of its own. That's kind of separate from X Copies community and separate from even your previous art community. I think it's something new that's been formed over the past 6 months plus, but also over the past just
6 days. The last 6 days have just been crazy, and it's been blowing up. Just quickly before Andre gets in, that was the second thing that led to, I think, that was one of the other factors that I think improved the chances of success for my project, was that I had been working on my my X account, because, you know, for us, a lot of the way that we communicate with each other is through that platform. And it's not optional really, because we've tried everywhere else and it hasn't changed. Like, you know, and no one, it doesn't really ever work. And so you're stuck with X. And so I actually curated my whole following, and I actually spent 2 months working on this, where every night, once I finished doing art for the night, I'd sit on the couch with my wife and I have my laptop and I go through and I'd manually unfollow all the low quality accounts that I'd accumulated over the years. And so the bad accounts who were basically, you know, dead accounts or like fake bots that had tried to get allowance from me and stuff like that. I'll probably have to do it again after this. But like, by removing and curating my timeline and reducing my following right down to only the core people who were still like active accounts. And like, God, I wish I had an API for this, because it was such grueling, terrible work. But by doing that, it meant the people who saw my posts were active accounts. And then by doing the moisturizing the timeline thing, for context, what that is that I had figured out this funny way to make people look really slick and moist and like rizzed up expressions and stuff. And it was really funny. And I did it the first couple of times. Well, I did one for OG, and I don't think you particularly liked it, or maybe you did, but I didn't get a lot of feedback from it. But I thought it was so funny, and I was like, this is hilarious. And I was like, I'm going to do this for everyone who asks and anyone who nominates anyone. And I said to myself, I was like, no account is too small to do this for. If you want it, you got it. And I think that what happened there was that, because I was doing it for people who, you know, really appreciated what I was doing because it was funny, or they appreciated me being a bigger account, giving them some spotlight as well. You know, I'm not that big, but like, you know, for like little accounts, they thought maybe that. They were going and talking about me to their friends, and everyone was talking about me for about a week about this stupid thing that I was doing. And it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. And it was a good kind of diversion away from where I was with X figures at the time. Go on, Andre.
Lost track of it, because now I'm thinking about my figure that I still have in my favorites. Love the interpretation of it. Like, the fidelity on some of those is so. I love that you let me jump into one of your worlds. You know what I mean? That felt really beautiful. It was like and I was just like, holy crap! I was stunned that night and laughing very hard.
I think that was what really captivated people about the whole moisturized thing and stuff. And I really kind of like leaned into it. I was just like, I'm moisturizing everybody. And I was like, I wrote like a whole like soul song about, like a whole soul album on Suno about it that I didn't release. And it was just all songs about Get Wet with me. And it's like, oh dude, I'll share with you, man. I might still mint it one day. I should have minted it then, just for like, you know, the timeline, but I just was too busy. But yeah, man, it's called Get Wet. Called Get Wet with Nuke, and it's basically like a whole like 70s soul album about like, you know, me moisturizing everyone in a tent on the side of the road. And so yeah, man, and I really kind of like lean into this narrative of this idea of that's what it was that I was doing, because, you know, in reality, what I was doing, I was getting a PFP, and then I was kind of like running it through my process that would get this resulting really slick, moisturized, dripping wet with like a super rizzed up, mogged out expression. And so a lot of what the changes were not just making people wet. It was about giving them the high cheekbones and the big jawline and the kind of like arched eyebrow and like really kind of like
You did
mogged
this
expression.
thing- Yeah, this awful Indian Joker, Kim Kardashian-esque, just like very perfectly fucked up Lear. Like,
Yeah,
amazing.
it's so like, suggestive as well. And like, and I think that was where it was really challenging, because if anyone was to go through my timeline and go and look at all the stuff that I did with this, I did a lot more men than women. And there is a reason, because obviously less women asked for it. And I wasn't really about to do it to too many women who did not ask for it. And the reason why is because it actually made them look way too sexy, and it made me look like a pervert to do that. And so I even had to re-roll some of them, because I was like, oh, that's a bit much, like I'm like, I don't want people to get the wrong impression that I'm just being a perv here and stuff. But like, it really did kind of like amp up this really sexually suggestive, sexually charged kind of image that was just funny, because it was so exaggerated. And I think that having the narrative and like building the assets around it, where I wrote an album and made these like album pictures of like, the tent and me with the moisturizer in the trash can and stuff like that, using that kind of visual language, that was a good primer for me for what I was eventually going to do 3 weeks later for the X-Figures launch, where I created this whole narrative with the toys, right? And so with the videos, there was 4 in total leading up to the reveal, right? The first one was actually one about, the first one was not, the first one was the kids action figure toy, like ad, right? And then there was so the kids playing with the toys. And then the second one was all the people lined up outside of like Walmarts and stuff like that. And then they all end up rioting over the toys. And there's like news coverage of it saying that like everyone's really excited for the release, right? And so that was a way of kind of like, setting up this narrative that that's what's happening with the release. And it was creating this artificial hype for it, sort of, by this narrative that I was creating. And then the third video was about how the violence on the physical release was so bad that they had to actually ban them for physical release. And then I had to, the character of Nuclear Samurai, me with the mask, and then he had to go drive around with all the toys and sell them like drugs on the street. And then eventually he saw like a poster for OpenSea to sell digital art, and then he drives the toys to OpenSea. And that was another way of kind of like communicating this idea of the hype. And then the fourth one was after the release, but before the reveal. And it was the one where I said that the reveal was, gonna blow their fucking heads off. And then basically everyone's got the toy boxes, and it was just all celebrities and kind of interesting people with funny faces. And just, they would look at the box and then their head would explode. I remember doing it and sending it in a group chat and being like, is this too far? And some people were like, no one said it was too far. And everyone said it was just far enough. So I put it out, and I think that video really kind of like amped people up, because at that point the series was released and I could actually see the volume. And I released the video about an hour before the reveal, and the activity on the project went crazy. Like, there was so much additional trading volume that happened in that period. So like, it obviously had some effect. But yeah, it was just really about creating this narrative and creating this kind of like media that supported this narrative. And I think that, there was a lot of people who were interested in it because they liked the way they looked and they liked the idea of it. And then having people have this kind of like this feeling to all go for it at once, and there was only 404, that kind of created this like pressure on the project and stuff. And I think that all led into what we saw with this release and reveal.
You also had a collection that before this that basically said GM to Cosmo de Medici every day for a year. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that played at all into.
I love the prankster. There's a prankster nature to almost everything that you do.
Yeah, I
Which
like
I
to have
love.
fun. Like, I think that like I like other people, and I like connecting with people, and I like kind of like ribbing people is something that's really fun for me. And when I am friends with you, I will make fun of you in a fun way, you know? And when I'm not friends with you, I might still do it in a way that will either turn you off completely or you'll find it funny. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of people who are like not really that interested in me because of some of the ways that I've tried this with them. But yeah, the GM to Cosmo thing, you know, that came from a very specific event actually. I saw this thing where it was literally a post where this guy goes, "Oh, I sent a DM to Cosmo every day for a year. And then on day 365, he said, just GM back." And I'm like, that's funny. I was like, that's funny to me because that means that he was seeing him the whole time and waited for that 365th one and then goes GM. And that's it. And doesn't say anything else. And I was like, that means that Cosmo Medici's also got that trickster spirit, you know? And I was like, I'm going to do the same thing as a platform, art sharing, because for me, that means that I have an excuse to do a 365 project, which I'd been wanting to do at the time because, you know, it's kind of like, it's just something that having that challenge is really important as an artist to keep yourself fresh or keep yourself like developing your style. And so having a reason to make a piece of art every day was good. And then I was like, I'll do it on this Cosmo Medici thing. And then I did it. And on day one, he said back GM immediately. And I was like, oh, great. Well, now that I have to do it, but like I've achieved the goal. The goal was to get into GM back, but the real goal was to do 365 days of art. And now I can't do that. I was like, I'll just do it anyway. And I said, well, now I have to do it. And he said, I'll be watching. And you know, through that project, that's how I, you know, connected with Cosmo the first time. Around day 100, I released a glitch series called Glitch Craft, which was like a mix between Baroque art and glitch art. And that was actually the first piece that he collected was Panopticon from that series. But like what I could see through that project was the things that he would engage with that helped to inform me kind of like what his taste was. It also helped to inform me of like what things from me, what styles I should develop more or what things I should work more towards, because it was a very eclectic series. It was just basically diaristically whatever was on my mind that day. And then I would work towards these movements and series and stuff that arose from that naturally. And then so that having that feedback directly from Cosmo Medici was so like helpful for me, like in that year to kind of like find where I wanted to go. And you know, when I hit the end of it and stuff, it was like almost sad because I was like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. And I actually said to him, I was like, should I you know, because by that point I had, you know, a DM chain going with him and stuff. And I said to him, should my next person be like X copy or Beeple or what? And he goes, I don't think you should do anyone in this space. He goes, I think you should do someone in the trad art space, like a museum or something. And I was like, you know, it's a great idea actually. And I never did it.
And you did X copy.
Well, I did, yeah, sort of, but not really. Well, kind of. I did eventually do it. I did what I wanted to do eventually. So, like, the moral of the story is I should have maybe just done it back then. No. Andre, you got a question?
I know I keep doing that. It's a habit from Spaces. Yeah, I've been trained like a good dog. But my thing is, you have, not only is your work amazing, and there's so much like breath to it, you have such a clarity to your own canon. You have your trickster god nature is very, it's just it's the best. It's one of my favorite through lines through all the works. But also your appreciation for the I think the mysteries and the stories within the space itself, the ecosystem and its canon. I wanted to ask, like, how is it that you do research into figures from a movement that is so young comparatively in the art world? What are you doing to research, let's say, like X copy or any figure in the space when you go down these rabbit holes? What does that typically look like?
Well, the best thing about doing this now and doing this with the way that we work in this space is that we have something that hasn't existed properly before in the art world, and that is having the ledger of Etherscan or having the ledger of the blockchain to research other people's art in a way, you know, and you can actually see so much about things by when you just go in and like look on the actual contract of something, or when you look on the transactions that have happened and stuff. And having that kind of like having that as a like the study guide and stuff to help you with things is really, really helpful. But also we have the benefit of people being, you know, living artists, and like, you know, you can find their collectors and you can find their friends and talk to them and ask them. And the thing is, if someone was to DM me and try to sell me something, I would be turned off pretty quickly. If someone was to DM me with something pretty disingenuous, I'd be pretty disinterested in answering. But generally, when someone comes and asks me about one of my friends in an honest way and then don't have nefarious purposes, I might be inclined to say something nice about them. You know what I mean? Like, depending on how you approach me. But like, I think that having the benefit of having actual living people who know these people, have their own experience in that time that they were there, you know, I could go, hey, I wasn't actually there when this thing released, but you were. What happened, you know? And having friends is a great resource for this kind of project, and making friends through the project is also a great resource for like figuring things out. They're basically primary sources, you know, or like technically secondary sources, because I'm not like gathering the data. But yeah, essentially like being able to find these sources and people who were there or people who experienced it, that's a really helpful thing. There are some problems in things not being documented properly in the way that we do things, like because everyone's like, oh, it's just on the blockchain. And so like you see some exhibitions get lost, or you see some work that didn't get pinned gets lost. I mean, not with bigger artists, I haven't really come across much of that, but I think that there is a real kind of like, for me, why I do this is because I have like social like limitations in the way that I understand other people, and I overcome them by filling in the gaps of knowledge and stuff. And like, I think that for some people that stuff doesn't matter at all, but for me that stuff is like a crutch that I overcome my own like limitations in understanding other people. Because like you know, there's some things that I don't really understand about other people, and I never will. And the only way I can understand anything about them is if I know their story, or I know more about them from this other perspective.
That was beautifully put.
Another project that I think deserves a little bit more attention is your project on Flow that you did called Covenant, which I believe which was your project right before X Figures. So I'm someone that collected, I think, like 15 of them, but for someone that doesn't know what it is, I'd love for you to share.
Flow is kind of like my secret project, right? I've got two secret projects, right? I've got the one that I never got to release that I really want to, and I will. And when I find out the right way to do it, I will. And you know that project. I've got that project, and then I've also got Covenant on Flow. And Covenant was for me really important work. And it was just a shame that it played out the way that it did. What happened with that was that I was asked to come and release something on a new platform, and it was so new and it was so experimental that they didn't really know how to kind of like how to put art onto it properly. And I was talking about it on a space like this week with the team. And the thing is, I'm actually still good friends with the people from the team there and stuff. And I really appreciate what they did to help me with launching that project when we did. But it just was, you know, theoretically a failure, but not entirely. So the thing is, I made 750 videos that were using insects as an allegory and metaphor for the rise of AI. And so every image, every video that was created was kind of like about this idea of like the emergence of AI. And I used a lot of like semiotic language about the types of insects used and the types of movements that they did. And so it was all of them were 9x16 and designed for display, and they were all built with like a custom glitch app that I made that created overlays of images and put them together in a specific way with like a damaged LCD screen mask. So there was 99 damaged LCD screen masks that would randomly be applied via this app. And then the underlying images were things about AI and things about like there were conversations with GPT and like all sorts of things would play out over the top of these like videos. The work itself, I was very, very proud of. One of the problems was the platform had a particular mechanic in play that meant that if it didn't mint out, that no one would get to see the work, and that it was recommended to me to do a large project, and it was recommended to me to do it at a very high cost, right? And that this was the biggest thing that I would consider successful from this project was that through its failure, I learned a lot about success, and I learned a lot about pricing things in a way that lets other people have success. And so through my project. And so that's where like the idea for X Figures, why I priced it so low on Mint, was because I wanted other people to get the chance to buy it and they make the profit from it. Um, but the way that that platform that I launched on was set up was not really geared very well towards artists either, because it was set up in a way where artists made only like 20% of the sale. You know what I mean? Like it was not great. And it was just kind of like really experimental work. And I actually did a series of long form videos that were about that as well, that I never got to release, that I eventually will look into releasing. But I think that project will be important in my catalog in terms of where it sits, and also because so few of them minted that it actually ended up being a nice edition size. So I think it was like maybe 150 of them minted. So it was a pretty good result. But like it was just such an insurmountable hill in terms of the size of the supply and the cost of the mint. So I think that's one that will eventually find its audience when they find it through the research with me. So yeah.
And then when doing a little bit of background for this show, I asked Kebab if they had any collections that they wanted to talk about, and Black suggested Horror World, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so Horrorwood is another one where I'm like, Horrorwood was like a really ambitious project, and I am very proud of what I did. It's one of my favorite secret projects, one that just didn't quite land as well as I had expected it would. But basically, Horrorwood was the collaboration between 4 artists. It was me, Black AI, Moonlight Media, and Lamoon. And all 4 of us are actually incredible artists, and we've all found success in our own ways in this space. And we all collaborated on this Halloween project we wanted to do, where we wanted to create this shared narrative world where each of us approached the story from our own angle and covered a time period of our own within the story. And so Black covered the very start of the project, start of the narrative in like the 1700s. He's going to kill me if I get it wrong. But it is probably wrong. But around the 1700s, there is a story of witches in a small town who were persecuted. And then I wanted to cover the reemergence of these like spirits in the 1950s, because I really wanted to do that art style. And so I did the 1950s era, and it was about how someone found the witch's crown, and then they came and took over the town. And then Moonlight covered the 60s. No, Moonlight covered the 80s, and Lamoon covered the 60s and 70s. And so basically, once they took over, like their stories were basically that the entire town was now overrun by monsters because witches had been running this town for like 20, 30 years. And then, so we had this like whole, wide spanning like narrative of this story for Horrorwood. And it was only 100 pieces actually. And we did like about 25 each. And, we did stills and videos for this project. And yeah, it just never really I think that people didn't get it, or maybe not that people didn't get it, but I think that we didn't do a good enough job of communicating exactly what the project was before it launched. And then by the time it had launched, you know how sometimes things work here where something doesn't land perfectly and then people kind of disregard it until a certain point in time where they might come back, and then when they find it, they go, oh, wow, that's actually a thing. And so for us, we're just kind of like leaving it as this like Easter egg for all of us. But if it comes out that like Foundation's going to shut down, I am going to go in the contract and mint them all out. I don't care, because it needs to be seen.
I think I own at least 5 of those.
Yeah, I own a bunch too. I love it. Like, yeah.
What's up, Dre?
I feel like for me, I love like RPG universes and tabletop stuff. And I just think about several artists coming together to create a setting. And I think about lately this IP called Trench Crusade. Are you at all familiar with Trench Crusade?
No, I'm not familiar.
Whole thing is essentially it's a semi steampunk but not really fantasy about what happens if the Knights Templar during the Crusades unlock a Hellmouth and betray everything that they're about, and so from there on in, all of the Western world has been plunged into essentially just darkness, and they, parallel history between our world and their world and stuff. And so it's this entire incredible setting that is essentially set in the First World War, except that demons have invaded and have been around for like thousands of years, right? And
That's cool.
That's what it is, right? So it's like
I
really
thought you were
cool.
gonna say it's about like trench. I think you were gonna say it was about degens, man. I was like, okay. Is it like
Yeah,
a
if
degen
you
thing?
know anything about me, it's that I love the
You're
gaming
in
aspect.
Solana trenches, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. The DeFi trenches. So there's still hope somewhere. But
But go
no,
on,
so
yeah, sorry.
this IP was one of those like universes where you could tell they were building a universe with the idea that eventually you'll be able to play this on a tabletop 3D print these things, and was marketing it to I'm sure I know for a fact it's like it came from a market of these kinds of people that are fans of this kind of stuff, and eventually found its own footing and like millions of dollars worth of Kickstarter. So it's just I can't help but think about like your setting that has so much narrative, and the idea of it also being funded in its own sense, a setting funded by but like crypto, the crypto art ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think
one of
that
those
like
things.
world building for me is like a real passion. Because like before I did this, one of my big hobbies that I don't have time for anymore was Dungeons and Dragons and like 5e and tabletop and RPGs, TTRPGs and stuff. I would I was a dungeon master, and like, I ran like a 2-year campaign of Tomb of Annihilation and stuff, and like I loved creating things and writing extra content, and like I would put in whole things into my campaign that were not in the book, and like fiddle with the mechanics of it and stuff like that, so that when my players were playing through it, they would have this experience, and really kind of like this experience designing kind of skill was like honed through that, and I bring a lot of that to my projects, and especially like when I'm coming up with things for X figures, another thing that people said to me about what made them excited about it was the pre-reveal graphic of the box, right? And this seems like such a simple thing, but I wanted the idea of a blind box, like what you get from Pop Mart, and you don't know what you're going to get. That's essentially what a drop is. It's just a blind box. You don't know the result. Is it this one or 1X? You're assigned one is random. And so the animation, I had designed the blind box, what it would look like, and then it basically lifts up, it shakes, and then a bag comes out, and it tears open, and then it shows an assortment of what it could be. Like that experience for me was important for creating that graphic was important for underlining what this experience was for people. And I think that using those kind of tools, like those semiotics of something that they're familiar with to communicate these ideas is important. In terms of whether or not Horrorwood could be a TTRPG, potentially. I actually did a series. One of my first successes in this space was the Nuclear Samurai collection in 2022. And it was towards the end of 2022. And it was like just before I got noticed by Claire Silver, and just before I started emerging into the foreign art world. And it was a PFP project. It was really ambitious, actually. And the problem with the series was that I didn't know exactly what I was doing. So I had to do everything manually. And there was actually ways, and I knew there was ways not to do it manually. I just didn't know what they were. And so I made this series where it was like 100 PFPs, and everyone you bought a new one would unlock, right? Same as like Delta Sources issues, right? But these PFPs, you had to buy one to see the next one. And they weren't randomly assigned. And so basically, when someone bought one, I would make the next one and reveal it the next day. And then everyone who had the PFP got an airdrop. And I planned it to be 10 weeks of airdrops, right? And so every PFP was getting a weekly airdrop for 10 weeks. And so if you were coming in and buying your PFP on week 5, you only got 5 airdrops. And so it really incentivized people to get in early. But people were still buying them towards the end and stuff. And I had another mechanic in there, which was a really poorly thought out one in terms of supply, where if you bought 3 PFPs, you would get a 1-of-1 airdrop to you weekly as well, right? And so that meant that, like, by the end, there was a theoretical maximum of 33 1-of-1s that I'd have to be doing weekly, as well as the addition that I was doing weekly as well. But with the addition was unlockable content of a short story that I'd written. There was an anthology series in this nuclear samurai world, the world of the Atomic Bushido. And I built out a whole world with like rules and systems and narrative, like backstory and like everything. And it's all still there. Like, there's 10 weeks of stories through these editions that all are still on OpenSea, I think. But yeah, that built an audience for me, and it was people that were really engaged and really looking forward to next week's story, and they were talking to me about the characters in the story and stuff like that. I think that world is probably richer for the TTRPG experience because it has so much rules to it, and it has so much kind of like factions and politics and all of that. And eventually I'm going to take those 10 stories and put them into a PDF or make them into an ebook that can be purchased or something, because I'm really proud of what I did there. And I think that it is something that kind of lives in obscurity, because now I realize that I don't think OpenSea still supports the unlockable content for the old stuff that was done. And so it's kind of like lost, maybe not. I need to look into that. But yeah, it was very ambitious. And so the problem with doing all of that manually, including the airdrops and the airdrop lists, I wasn't even doing snapshots because I didn't know how. And so I was manually copying out every address, and I had like a big spreadsheet of all the addresses I had to airdrop these stories to every week. And it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of gas as well. Oh my God, like 2022, some weeks I was spending hundreds of dollars in gas just to send out these editions. Like, but I said that I would do it, and I did it. So, you know, but it was a great collection otherwise.
Another collection that I'd love to bring up is our cooking collab, because I think that's something
nice.
Also hasn't gotten as much eyeballs as I think it should, and it's really special that like everyone from you to Delta to Black and to Stomp have all just like gone on to do even more incredible things since that drop. So I mean, you actually, I think, made 2 pieces for that collab, so I thought that was really special as well.
So yeah, that was actually a really good example of, like, you know, like Andrés said before as well, like that, you know, for me, I'm someone who, I like to have fun with what I'm creating and stuff, and I like to do things that allow me to connect with other people. And when you put that together, you know, we were doing it basically as like what's called an exquisite corpse, right? And so, you know, you guys know what it is, but like for the audience who might not, exquisite corpse is basically where you start a sentence and then the next person finishes it, and then that's kind of like the game. And so we started with Adam Tastic started with a piece, and then he gave it to me, and then I put myself into it, and I transformed it into something else. And from there, it went through this lineage of all these different artists and became transformed from this one place into like a completely different place. And charting the progress of that through all the sequence of images and stuff is like amazing. And it's a huge list of names too. It was, for me, a real honor to kind of like play with them in that way and give them that template of what I had done for what they did and work on it in the way that we all did. I think that it was one of those things where, like, I think that there's amazing work that's done here, like every day, that gets kind of like missed or overlooked or faded or not given the kind of like love or flowers that it deserves. And I think so much of it has to do with how it is marketed and packaged and put out there. And sometimes it's also just a victim of circumstance as well, because so much about the attention that thrives in this space is determined by things that are out of our control. You know, there's so much about like market metrics and like, you know, greater meta narratives and stuff that happened. We're all kind of like in the sea, like going on these waves, and we have no control over some aspects of where the waves are going. And all we can do is try to float and try to set up our sails in the right direction to catch the wind. And I think sometimes, you can do everything right and have the perfect thing not get appreciated. But I think that, like, for me, you know, the benefit of doing things on chain the way we are and the benefit of working in crypto is that I don't have a short-term view of any of this. I have such a long-term view that I'm like, I wouldn't do it this way if I didn't think this would outlast me. And my goal is to put work out there and be prolific and do things that will give people something. If they want to find out some stuff about me, there's enough of me out there to put together that they'll eventually, hopefully, understand something about me. So it's really about putting my fingerprint into the world. And when it's doing things with the people that I love and the people who are my friends like that, putting my stamp there next to Delta Source and to Stone and like Atomtastic, that shows people that I was there with them. And I think that that's really important too. And doing something like Horrorwood with like Black and Moonlight and Lamoon and me, that shows people that we were all together in this time at that point in time. And I think that, when you look back at movements like the Surrealist movement, you see these friendships that are there, that play out in the artwork and stuff. And you see like letters that they sent to each other and artworks that they did that were directed at each other. Like that all happened in art. And it's happening here in our space too. And I think that the way I see it is doing this stuff for my lineage and doing this stuff for the future, so that if someone ever, for some reason, is interested enough in me, there's enough of me to see some of what I was doing and who I was doing it with.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also why I started this interview series and why I'm appreciative of guests like yourself coming on and joining and giving a little bit more context to what goes on chain, because I feel like so much of that context is lost in like sales here and things like that. Like, I don't know, the narrative is very tough to follow if you're not kind of sitting down for some time and just telling it how you want it to be told. And that's why I think also when you were doing your spaces before and during the drop, that was also very helpful for people to kind of get to know you and get to know what you were building with X Figures. And I know it's always tough for you because you're in Australia, so the hours are a little bit wonky if you need to get on spaces. A lot of times they're during times that you're supposed to be asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, like I've not gotten a lot of sleep the last week because there's just been so much to do and so much people to talk to, and so much like community kind of like wrangling and stuff to do, and like, I think one of the things that happened with X Figures that kind of like has been really interesting to see is that, people's reaction to the series in some ways is a lot driven more by the volume that it's done than by the content of its work. And so like there is a lot of interest in me right now because of, getting struck by lightning, and so there are a lot of things that I did to hold the lightning rod to get struck by lightning. But, there is also some things that are also like, out of my control too. I was very lucky in that I got given the opportunity to drop what I did because I got told on the calendar, when it just, for the record, working with OpenSea was actually fantastic. And they were so supportive and helpful with this idea and with my release and stuff. And like setting up the drop the way that we did with locked in royalties, it actually gave me this experience I'd never really fully had, except for like my Solana drop on Sol Meetscapes. I've never really seen that many royalties from secondary sales. Like I just wasn't here for it when that was happening. And by the time my career was starting, 2023, Blur came around and royalties were gone. And everyone was bitching about them for years, and I didn't fully understand it. And now, after getting them for a couple of days, I actually do fully understand it. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I see where everyone was so mad, because like it is a really important thing. And I think once a project maybe hits enough volume, I might turn them off or turn them down, because like it's not about the max extracting, but it is about kind of like supporting the project and the things that people have been the things that I've been doing for the project have been funded by the royalties. And so like that's helpful. But yeah, by having the time allotted to me, that was like that the option was given to me, I was like, great, I'll do it then, because it's before Delta Source's fellowship release. It's before Die Was the Most Liked Crystal Bodies. It was before all of these things were scheduled to happen before New York, the NFT NYC, right? So I didn't want it during NFT NYC. I wanted it before that, and I didn't want it at the same time as Delta Source's fellowship drop,
I
because
was about to say, because that was one of those moments where I looked at all the drops happening at once, and I was like, there is a potential for collision here. And I was fascinated by the timing of each. Each of them was obviously successful, but I was like, what happens? How dynamic is our space really to handle as much as it
yeah.
handles on a daily basis? And then I go, I actually know nothing, and I prefer knowing nothing. I'm like, actually, I don't need to test the hypothesis. It all worked out.
I think that we're in a lucky place right now, because the tension's being turned back to art, and that's because I think that we have seen a signal that has shown people a pathway to make money through art again, and that is through this rise and quick success of some, like particularly like basically the consensus event that happened around Modest, happened around Manic, happened around Gavin Miller. Like, you know what I mean? There's these stories that are happening, these narratives that are happening that show people that if you invest in artists, you can get a return. And people have been so burned and so hurt by, being in the trenches and going in the casino and losing all their money for like 9 to 12 months. And now are coming back to art because it's something that has more of a narrative. It can be more reliable and more influential and more able to be predicted than a shitcoin that you might put money into and then lose it overnight. And I think that, although art has less liquidity, there are ways to buy art and sell art without losing too much money. And there are ways to do it where you can make money.
I have a question for you, though.
Sure.
Just real fast. Do you feel like seeing there are trends that are being repeated up an octave, I feel like, with our space, where we see a resurgence in I want to say like kind of like glitch express. How did you call it for X hobby? Let's go, like glitch expressionism, like digital expressionism.
Yeah. So I would call, digital. So the thing is, I would say that I think I know where you're going with it, but yeah, digital expressionism, I'd say.
I'm almost there. I have another half, I promise. Because it's the digital expressionism, and also the fact that you see artists using the model that existed before of, for example, like just now, the guy with the most likes released in essence a PFP collection. Right?
Yeah, generative collection.
Exactly, like generative, one of X. Like I myself included in that, obviously. But I see a lot of artists kind of embracing that model out of a sense of familiarity and love, I feel like, as opposed to like any sort of extractive liquidity, right? I see there's a big upsurge in the fine art usurpation of that, right? Of one of X or multiples or what have you. What do you think about those two trends coexisting?
I think that there is a coalescence and like a convergence of like opportunity and opportunity and desire. And I think that like there is like it's a complicated like gumbo of like people might see more of something and then realize that's something they want to explore themselves, and then they explore it and then someone else sees it and it becomes this contagion event. You know what I mean? When something kind of blows up and becomes successful and people get this exposure to it and then they realize other people like it, this consensus event happens not just for the collectors, but it happens for the artists as well. And my most recent edition drop consensus was about that kind of, and it's just, in it says, no one wanted it until everyone else does, and now they all do. And like, no one wanted it until someone else does, and now they all do. And like that idea is that once you see other people doing things and you realize that it's fun or desirable or has some merit, then people by their very nature have this kind of like tendency to want to do that themselves in their own way. And so, yeah, I'm seeing this for some people, it's a survival move. Some people seem to be doing it because they think it's their only choice. Some people are doing it because they're genuinely interested in it. And like, the thing is, I'm not there to judge or try and pass that out. I think that it becomes pretty apparent for, I think that these kind of things reveal themselves throughout like the way they play out and stuff like that. So there's probably going to be some people who just do it purely to survive, and there's some people who do it purely because they love it. And that goes not just for the aesthetics, but also the mechanics and stuff, whether it's doing generative releases or whether it's doing what X is. Like, I generally err on the side of trust in that regard, because the truth is that I can't fully understand someone's motives for doing something unless I was them or was in the room with them when they came up with it. And like, so I'm not one to judge and say, oh, you're just copying this person, or you're just doing that because they did that. Because like, I mean, I was in a space, I'm not even getting to it, but like, there was someone I'd never heard of. I will get into it. There was someone I'd never heard of in a space
Look
the
at
other
you
day.
trying desperately to get into it, then stopping yourself.
Oh, no. This is drama. This is crypto drama. No. No, seriously, I was in a space with someone I'd never heard of before, and they're like, oh, your idea is copying mine. I'm like, well, I've never heard of you, so I don't care. Like, but I think the thing is that there can be this tendency for people to try and guess at other people's motivations. And I think that other people's motivations become pretty clear when you look at them on a long enough timeline. And I think that I'm generally someone who I'm like on the hopium. I really like to see the best in people, and I really like to think that people do have good intentions. And the thing is that, people will eventually reveal their true colors when the time comes right. And sometimes you see people will do something that disagrees with what you thought they were, and you go, okay, well, now I know what to expect. But like, for me, I give people the benefit of the doubt more often than not.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's actually a good place to end it, because I don't want to
People are very like
Andres' time, and I know that this is
I'm enjoying myself.
for like
This is a good spot. That was a pretty nice mic drop. That gave me hope in mankind.
Hope in the artists, at least. Yeah.
It's been really, really awesome, and we really appreciate you joining us today. And huge congrats again on X Figures, and it's been so amazing, like watching this project from before it even started to actually execution and seeing you nail it. And nothing makes me more than being a proud friend and collector of yours. And it's really, really awesome to see how you really kind of were able to capture lightning in a bottle with this one. And I wish you all the success in the world, and that you continue to have the next project be even bigger than this. And I hope that X Figures is the smallest thing that people know you for.
Thank you so much for that. And like, look, I appreciate both of you so much, and I've been meaning to come on and talk to you for such a long time, but I was like, I'll just wait until it's the right time. And I think now's a good time for it, because some people might want to know more about me, or people might want to know, what I'm doing next, or what I went into, what I was doing last. And I think that it was a good time to come and speak to you. But like, the funny thing is that like, we'll probably get off this space and then get into another one straight after.
That sounds about right, to be quite honest.
Yeah, but I mean, then people won't have to watch a 4-hour thing of us just talking to shit. So, but yeah, thanks so much, guys. And like, huge respect for both of you as artists, friends, collectors. Like, I think that there's a lot of people in this space that you can have something with them that is so much more than just a collector-artist relationship or an artist-artist relationship. I think that everyone kind of like has this potential to be real friends. And that is what's really exciting to me about this kind of like social, artistic space that we're in. And so, yeah, it's definitely great to be friends with both of you.
Yeah, likewise. And huge congrats again, and much love, and thank you so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure, my brother.
The pleasure's all mine. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Talk to you in 5 minutes.
Yes. Ciao.
MLow, it's the MLow show. MLow, it's the MLow show. MLow, it's the MLow show. Talking to people about crypto.